the hip hinge is a really valuable movement and one you're going to find often in your programming. So let's talk about a few key points that can help you navigate the hip hinge, avoid any sort of back pain or that whole scare of any sort of back pain developing from it, and allow you to maximize the movement so you can get the most out of it. So there's three things I want you to focus on, and the first one is rotation. So if I'm using this PVC pipe, kind of pretend it's a barbell. We'll also talk about dumbbell and different variations as well, but just pretend for now that this is a barbell. As I'm hinging down, if I start to rotate one way more than the other, it's going to put more force on one side of your back. And then your QL, your quadratus laborum muscle, could really tense up, and that's where you feel like you really messed something up. Feels like you can't sit down except doing a little jagged dance to get down. So you have to really focus on hinging down with control, minimizing any sort of hip shift as you're making this movement. You could have that hip shift happening because you put your wallet on one side of your body, maybe you drive a lot and you're reaching for the pedal a lot in your car, or when you sit, you just kind of tuck onto one hip more than the other. And these are things you can pay attention to in your day-to-day life to make sure that you're not adding this dysfunction on top of this movement over and over again with things that go on a day-to-day basis. But in the meantime, this hip shift can be corrected by just knowing it exists and feeling for it. So you can take a wall, position yourself pretty close to the wall, feet are shoulder width apart, toes pointed straight ahead for this variation. And as you're hinging down, you're going to feel your hips hit the wall. And if there's any uneven point of contact, so say if you feel your left hip or your left glute hit that wall sooner, then you know you're shifting to that left side. So then you just try to correct. Just with your body weight or an empty barbell here, you can really focus on hinging down controlled, feeling for that touch point, and making sure you're hinging evenly. The wall is a great resource for you to utilize to feel where that contact point is happening. It also really helps you focus on driving your hips behind your knees. So a lot of times when back pain starts to really develop is when you're going into this hip hinge, but you're kind of shifting your knees forward instead of keeping your knees still and your back nice and straight. So that little difference of here as you're hinging is going to put a lot more pressure than being nice and strong and getting your hamstrings engaged in that hinge position. You always want those hamstrings involved as you're completing the hinge. So again, to control rotation, feel for it at first and then you can know it's happening and correct it. If you have access to a mirror and you're watching yourself in the mirror, even better, you can see if any sort of rotation is happening and make sure you assess your day-to-day life to make sure you're not adding that dysfunction on top of it all just based off of things you're doing on the day-to-day. The next thing to think about is how are you stacking your joints? Are you controlling your joints? So what I mean by that, I'm going to use the PVC pipe again and say if I have this PVC pipe is kind of tracking where force is. So right now I'm pushing straight down on the ground, that force is pushing straight back up. You might remember that from 5th grade science class, equal and opposite reactions. So now if I'm completing a hinge and my knee starts to dive in, what happens to that force? Well, you can see from the PVC pipe, that force is coming across my body. It's causing rotation that we just talked about previously, and could be causing some issues of knee pain, hip pain, all that good stuff. So instead of allowing that knee to dive in, keep it pressed away, back nice and straight, so as you stand up, you're hinging nice controlled, keeping everything stacked. This is going to minimize any chance of that pain starting to develop as you're completing this motion. When you keep your joints stacked, your body's usually pretty happy. When the joints get out of sync, that's when the body starts to experience some pain and express pain, which we're trying to avoid or correct from past movement issues. So again, think about that PVC pipe. If you're allowing things to buckle instead of staying stacked, the PVC pipe being the force direction, you can see that all of a sudden we're going through different angles versus being straight up and straight down and efficient with our movement. Okay, so we have rotation, we have controlling our joints. The last one to talk about is the distance of the implement. So when you're hinging down nice controlled, if you start to really hinge, but you allow your arms to drift away, all of a sudden that's going to put a lot of pressure on your low back. So you really want to control how far that implement is from your body. So as you hinge, really nice controlled hinging down. Don't let that implement drift away. Same thing with the row. Keep the dumbbell close to your body as you're rowing. Okay? Because what that's going to do is it's going to keep the weight inside the frame of your body. As that weight drifts outside of your frame of body or gets too far outside of your frame of your body, that's where tension can develop in the low back. So again, hinging down nice controlled. Think about really controlling, keeping it close to your body instead of letting it drift away. You do that by keeping your lats engaged so your back is nice and engaged throughout the movement and you're really controlling that bar path. Okay, same thing with dumbbells, same thing with a band. If you let that bar path or that band path or that dumbbell path get too far away from your body on things like a row, a hinge row that we're doing, an RDL, a deadlift, that's where that pain can start to develop with your low back. So again, I want you to think about rotation. I want you to think about stacking your joints, so you're keeping everything nice controlled. And the third thing is think about keeping the implement close to your body, so the weight that we're using close to your body, because when it stays inside your frame, your body's usually pretty happy. When things get outside of your frame too far, that's when that pain can start to develop. There you go.